Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us this evening for our Cumberland Family Academy workshop. Cumberland Family Academy is a Cumberland County Schools initiative. The Cumberland Family Academy is committed to enriching the lives of children by bringing parents, guardians, and schools closer together as equal partners. When families have high expectations for children and encourage them to work hard, they support and promote a child's academic, social, and emotional well being. The purpose of the Family Academy program is to provide families with the necessary tools to support the success of their child's education. Our workshop tonight is Beyond the Labels Understanding the Struggling Learner with our presenter, Dr. Deborah Harris and Tanya Fuel.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to try to get our screen shared. There it is, so that we can all be together here. All right, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to let Tanya introduce herself. I'm Deborah Harris. I'm a military brat and primarily raised in this area, but just returned here a few years ago to retire. But my passion is working with children who struggle and children with disabilities. And I've got close to 50 years of experience in the area, so in the field. So I'm excited about this opportunity to give back to my home. I graduated from E.E. Smith in 1970. So that's a little about me. And the young lady that's about to introduce herself happens to be my daughter, but she stands on her own. Tanya?
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Very excited to be here as well. As was stated, my name is Tanya Fuel. A little bit about me and my background. I have a law background, finished with a Juris Doctorate, and went on to prosecute criminal felony cases for several years. And then I went into a unique path that led me to education. I've done alternative dispute resolution, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but my passion has always been youth, and I have worked with youth in the education arena, both in homeschool, public school, and private school, from pre-K all the way to the university level. Very passionate about this opportunity to come with you all and just share some of the things that I have learned through my expertise and experience. And the blend in working with my mom has been one that hopefully you will see is quite unique and is truly something that will help you in your advocacy for your own child.
Okay. Well, here is the good news. We have a lot of great information. We're excited about it. Here is the challenge. Every time I have an opportunity to do something like this, I always have too much information, but we are working very hard to keep it keep it succinct. So we'll go from that for that. I failed to say that I taught children with special needs for 12 years. Then I went to the university level. And then for the last 25 plus years, I've been a consultant for school districts around the country in helping them to better understand children who struggle. All right, so we know that the official title is Beyond the Labels, Understanding the Struggling Learner. But when we were pulling this together, I came across a title that I've used before, and I went, oh, this has got to be it. It's called The Miseducation of the Struggling Learner. And there's a reason that we say this, and I'm going to let Tanya introduce that reason and give a little story as to why this becomes so important. So hang on to that word, the miseducation of the struggling learner.
So if you can't tell by now, we have so much energy and we're really excited about this. This quote from Carter G. Wilson really helps to capture what we're talking about. And this is from his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. And the quote is, if you make a person think that he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one. When you control a person's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. So a connection for me, as I told you, my background, working in the state attorney's office, prosecuting criminal felony cases, I often saw young people hit that door over and over in the courthouse. And so the challenge that I often saw, which caused me to really decide to go into education, is that it was the miseducation of these young people that led them into the criminal justice system. And I knew that the real impact needed to start there in the education. And so even this quote highlights that, and it even brought me to the passion of coming back there. So as we're talking with our families about what do we do and how do we address the miseducation of the struggling learner, really looking at the concept of their mind and how do we control and set forth the positive aspects into their mind so that we can make sure our children will be successful.
I tell you, Carter J. Woodson was onto something when he wrote this quote, because even though he was talking about the Negro at that time, we see this over and over and over again. And I don't think anybody has any malice intent, but let me share with you how this is manifested in schools. So the miseducation of struggling learners happens when teachers and parents or others believe they can't do it. You know, you go, oh, he's a sweet child, but he just can't do it. What you're doing, or what we're doing, is we're beginning to affect their thinking. And after a while, they won't try anymore. So it's important for us to recognize that that is a very significant issue. All right. The other thing is convincing, or people being convinced that traditional ways of teaching will work for all children. No, 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 that is not going to work. And that's one of the things that we've worked very hard on, trying to get people to understand there are many ways to teach children. As different as kids are, our instruction needs to be the same. And as parents, we can help support that in our homes, and you'll see how in a minute. A lot of people think changing instruction requires too much additional work. No, it's not about working harder. It's about working smarter. And that's what we go for. There's a belief out there that some kids are so needy and so low that they can't make it in the general ed classroom, or they're going to lower the scores and make me look like a bad teacher. All of those are manifestations of miseducation, and that miseducation starts typically when kids are struggling. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I just want to hit one thing. My grandson, Tanya's son, started struggling in school, and we saw him get on that path toward the justice system. He was a young kid, kindergarten, but if we hadn't intervened at that time, guess what? He may have been another statistic. And that's what really throws us into this and saying, we as parents are the greatest advocates for our children, but it's not an antagonistic advocacy. It is a collaborative advocacy that we work with teachers, we communicate, because that's the way. Keep in mind, in all of my years of teaching, I've probably met one teacher who just had no business in education whatsoever. So when you think about the thousands of teachers that we work with, that is not a common characteristic that they don't care. It's just that a lot of times they don't know how, and we've got to work in a way that leads them to success. All right.
So just to keep this interactive, I want you to put in the chat if you're noticing some of these similarities at home with your children. Just put me or put not me, haven't noticed. I want to see kind of where we're going. Have you noticed any of these things, whether they're with your own child or with another child? There we go. Okay. So some of these things are just noticed because what they are outside things that we don't always pay attention to. But that's why we're bringing it today, because it's really going to lay out that concept of what are we talking about when we're looking at those learners who are struggling. Now, so often our teachers are going to say, oh my goodness, I know you've heard it before. I'd rather a child that just sat quietly, right? Always nap time, calm, peaceful, quiet at all times. But that doesn't apply to every child. And if we're really talking about our learners being successful, we have to find the solution that works. Also, now, other than COVID hitting us really hard and us needing to sit in spaced out isolation, even prior to COVID, teachers that didn't quite understand or get the process of how to reach the struggling learner, isolated students amongst themselves and didn't allow or encourage that interaction, which would encourage free thinking and encourage the excitement of learning. So we're going to talk about how these things are not the solution, because one thing does not fit all, one size does not fit all, and there are many different methods in order to really effectively reach our learners on any level. And how can we as parents effectively advocate for them?
The important message is that our journey for educational excellence must begin with a change in our vision of education. You know, the law requires all children from certain age to, I think it's 16, they must be in school. It is a requirement. So they say that is compulsive schooling. But my question is, what about compulsive learning? When are we going to say it's not enough for them just to be in school? We must ensure that they are learning. When we take that journey, all of us may be in the car, but the dips and the curves and around the mountains, the ups and the downs really require us to go beyond our norm, not just having kids sitting there, but having kids really learning. But before you can learn, children can learn, there's something that must occur. And that's the basic understanding. We must first understand the learner. And we're going to hone in on a moment, just what does a struggling learner look like? But then, and this is my forte, this next one, understanding how children learn. We teach day in and day out, but do we understand how they learn? That's the thing that's the most important. How do they learn? And then realizing that learning is more than accommodate, pardon?
Yes, I was just going to jump right in and say, definitely, it moves on from there, that it's more than just accommodations and modifications.
Yeah.
It's more than just that adjustment of time or looking at specific remedies. Learning requires the belief that all children can learn. Absolutely. So despite what we're experiencing in their process, they can learn. We just have to figure out how to effectively reach, teach, and help our students learn, even if they're struggling learners.
And by the way, guys, now, you know, people used to say education, school of education, college of education. Colleges are now changing that to say college of teaching and learning, because teaching and learning are two different things. I can teach until I'm green in the face, but if no one learns, what is the worth of or the value of my teaching? But that, keep in mind, anytime that we fully leave all of the teaching or the education of our children to the school, we can fall short. Home has to be involved in that. That's why I was willing to volunteer for this, because I'm like, okay, let's get the homes involved. Let's see what you can do. Okay, enough talk about that. Let's get into the real meat of this evening. This is the part that I really love. Okay, Tanya, I don't know how this thing goes. How does it go? There it is.
And so we're looking at the idea, you've heard us say, the miseducation of the struggling learner. But every child is not the struggling learner. What specifically is the struggling learner? The struggling learner is someone who has to work harder than others around them in order to accomplish the same task or learn the same thing.
And so often they are behind others. That's important. They work hard along and then they're still behind.
Exactly. And it puts a different spin on it, because it's not changing what they're doing. It's just viewing the process that it takes them a little bit further, a little bit longer to do it.
I'm glad you said that, because a lot of times people don't really see that a kid is struggling because they don't pay attention to the mask that students wear. See, let's see if you can really identify with this, because it's very, very True.
Before we jump into this, and I love that, remember we said we're going to keep it interactive for you. So we want you to put in the chat room, what are some masks that you see students might wear in the classroom to cover up struggling or that process? What are some masks you see? Go ahead and put them in the chat. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. What are some masks that students wear to cover up their struggling? Anger, good job. Humor, good. We'll take a couple more. Misbehavior, excellent. Let's do one more. And sleepy. Oh, these are great.
They're great. We almost don't have to do this slide, but what we're going to do is share with you some of the research things that has been documented in research that the mask that they wear. All right, first one.
Being bad. And I put up the quotation marks because between my mother and myself, that is one of our biggest pet peeves, is calling a child bad. But oftentimes, as you all had the misbehavior on there, oftentimes children act out or are labeled by this mask of misbehaving because they're using it as a cover up for their struggling.
Yeah, so if I can divert your attention from what I can't do to what you see me do, then maybe you won't be so down on me. All right, that's a good one. All right, oops, let's go. Uh-oh, I'm hitting all of them now. Okay, the one of competence. And we see this a lot, competence. Oh, I did that last year. That's easy. Yeah, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah. And you can see that a lot, especially the older you get with these kids, they just like, I have it all. And the teacher knows, and the parent knows, and everybody knows. Kid, you don't have it, but yet the kid is exuding that competence so that he can cover for what he doesn't know. All right.
Again, a mask to cover. And then the victim mask. Woe is me. Everything is bad. The teacher is against me. I can't do it because this curriculum is against me. I can't do it because A, B, and C, because they're the victim. And that is a mask that a lot of times students wear when they're struggling in order to place the blame on someone else versus ownership of the parts that they're struggling in.
Yeah. And let's look at this next one, boredom. Oh, this is so boring. I'm bored. Can we do something else? I'm bored. I tell my grandchildren, as long as you have a brain, there's never a reason to be bored, because your brain is such a masterful instrument that it can create all kinds of journeys, but you've got to be willing to engage it. All right?
Helplessness. Again, very similar to the victim mentality, but they're just in need and cannot figure out a way to do A, B, and C. They don't even make the effort to do it because there's a mask that they're putting on, because they have that doubt in their mind of their success. And so they just automatically say, I can't do it, so I'm not even going to try.
The most disturbing one that people see a lot is the clown. You know, the kid that's the class clown. Let me keep everybody laughing, and then nobody will notice that I don't know what I'm doing. Let me keep everybody laughing, and then the teacher can't be mad at me because I'm making her laugh. And that is one that is often people just go, that is one funny kid. Oh boy, you're going to be on stage one day. Blah, 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 blah. And I was listening to something today when they were saying how many people fail to realize just how unhealthy Robin, the guy I can't even think of his name, but anyway, he was a comedian and he committed suicide, but he was the funniest human being ever, but suffered deeply from depression. So we have to be careful that we don't overlook those things. Okay. And
That's right. Thank you, Renata. Robin Williams.
Robin Williams. Thank you.
And then the last one is really the cloak of invisibility, you know, that nap time that we saw in the beginning, where they're just quiet and they sink in. Maybe if I'm not seen, no one will notice. Maybe if I'm quiet, no one will notice. All of these are different masks that our children are wearing. And oftentimes this mask are what is seen versus the true part that they're struggling in their learning. And so as they go about in trying to truly exemplify how to support them, how to best meet their needs, often they're lost because they're focusing on the masks that are present versus the actual aspects that they're struggling in.
Yes, and that invisibility one, they're the ones, that's, like Tanya said, are most overlooked because they're compliant and they're quiet. So just watch them, it's important. Okay, so now we move to learning requires an understanding of how children learn. We skipped the slide because we realized that in our talking, we've really already done that slide, so no need of going through it. So now what we're going to do is introduce you to the brain, just understanding how the brain learns. And I want to first set the stage by saying that just getting a general overview should be enough to inspire you that every child can learn. And even your child that may be struggling, hopefully this little section here will help boost you, give you more confidence in the ability to do some things. Okay, so we're going to watch this video. Tanya, how do I have to go back out to get the thing in? Okay, hold on just a second. Oh, it's on, okay. And share, okay. And we will start now.
Since the dawn of man, we have looked up and wondered about the mysteries of outer space. We still know little about it, and we know even less about inner space, the space inside our heads. You are looking at the most sophisticated computational information processing system ever made. It is lightning fast, clever, adaptive, and can often tell if something is wrong with it. In fact, there are as many neurons within this boy's brain as there are stars in the galaxy he is currently viewing. But the universe inside his head, and yours, and mine, is still so vast and so unexplored that we can barely understand how a 3-pound human brain knows how to pick up a glass of water and drink it. The mysterious human brain. We know enough to know we've only just begun to understand the basics. We're not clueless though. We do know a few things, and those things I like to call brain rules. It's extraordinary what some of our brains can do. Go ahead and multiply the number 8,388,628 times 2 in your head. Can you do that in a few seconds? Probably not. There's a young man who can double that number 24 times in the space of a few seconds. He gets it right every time. There's a boy who can tell you the precise time of day at any moment, even in his sleep. There's a girl who can correctly determine the exact dimensions of an object 20 feet away. Yet none of these kids could be taught to tie their shoes. Indeed, none of them have an IQ greater than 50. Your brain may not be nearly so odd, but it is no less extraordinary. My goal is to introduce to you 12 things we know about how that extraordinary brain works. The brain rules cover such topics as exercise, memory, stress, sleep, vision. The supporting research for each of my brain rules must first be published in a peer-reviewed journal and then successfully replicated. The problem is that so much of what we do in our modern world ignores these brain rules. We try to drive while talking on our cell phones, even though it is literally impossible for our brains to multitask when it comes to paying attention. We have created high-stress office environments, even though a stressed brain is significantly less productive. Our schools are designed so that most real learning has to occur at home. That could be funny if it weren't so harmful. Let's find out why.
Now, we will not be able to go through all of those 12 here, but we wanted to introduce you to it. Let me tell you why this is so significant. When I finished my PhD at Chapel Hill, I had an opportunity to do a a postdoc in Amsterdam, Holland, on the neurology of learning disabilities. And what we did every single day was dissect human brains and to learn how the brain works, how it's constructed, what happens when a brain has not been developed as far as reading is concerned, or as far as language is concerned. It was fascinating. And what I began to say then is, wow, what happens if people knew more about this that could absolutely help with struggling learners or students with disabilities? So we want you to understand the link. So look at this. As far as the brain is concerned, in order for instruction to take place, there must be input of the information. The information must be integrated, or in other words, meaning brought to it. You must be able to store it, and then you must be able to give it out or give it back when necessary. Now, that's what the brain requires, all right? What the brain also requires that's necessary for learning is that you have to have perceptual skills, processing skills, memory skills, language skills. If you don't have those skills at a certain level, then you could be considered with a person with a disability. But it doesn't mean you can't learn. It just means that you have to address that disability in the context of your instruction. So if I have perceptual problems, and we're going to talk about what that is, if I have perceptual problems, before you begin to input the information, before you begin to teach me, before you begin to deliver me, you've got to make sure you address the perceptual parts. So let's take a look at each of these really more closely, and then we'll be able to have some questions. All right, so what is input, Tanya?
And the reason why we're going through this with you all is because as parents, I know there might be some educators on here as well, but really understanding this aspect of your child as they're going through their learning process can help you in your advocacy for what their needs may be in order to help them so that they're no longer struggling and they're receiving what they need. So the input, as we talked about, is the perceptual abilities, is the process of recognizing that information and interpreting it in sensory ways. We're going to go through a brief little activity that's going to help us understand just a little bit more about what we're talking about, just on a broad scale, as we look at this idea of perception. So we're going to put up.
And keep in mind that perception, it can be auditory, it can be visual. And as Tanya stated, we're doing broad areas here. There are a lot of subcategories in it, but we just want to give you a feel for what it is and how you can help improve it in your home, and we'll with your children at home, okay?
So when looking at this picture, so we're getting activity again. I want you to look at this picture, and I would like for you to write in the chat, how many horses do you see? How many horses do you see? And you can just put it in the chat.
You got any answers yet?
All right, so I see 5. Someone said 5. Someone said 4. Someone said 3. All right, my mom's going to take a moment and she's going to someone says 4 horses and 1 fowl. Okay, with the expert. And someone else said 5. Someone said 4.
Okay. All right.
Someone laughed.
Let me show you this. Okay, so this is 1 horse, if you can see.
And you see her pointer. There you
go. Yeah, okay. And here's the other horse, that's 2. And then here's the 3rd horse, that's 3. Here's the 4th horse, that's 4. And here it is a fowl, but it's still a horse. That's 5. Okay. Now, I want to tell you, when we share this with students that have perceptual challenges, they'll say, I don't see any horses, I see cows. Or I see snow. Or I see ice cream and cookies.
Cookies.
Okay. And cookies, exactly. But watch this. Here's the thing that's exciting about this, because without fail, all teachers and parents They will open a picture book to a kid and they'll go, tell me what you think the story is going to be about based on the pictures. And if the kid has a perceptual problem, he might say, ice cream and cookies. And then you'll go, oh my Lord, this kid is so low. He can't even see there are horses there, you know? But this is designed to help you see just what that looks like, okay? That's one. So that's just an idea. Let's go to the information processing one. This is the one where most people have difficulty with, most struggling learners. It's organizing information that is stored and being able to use it and put it in the right categories and so forth. By the way, I forgot, with regard to the perception, one of the best things you can do to help develop that skill is let your children do puzzles. Puzzles, puzzles, puzzles. It really does develop. I hate puzzles. I really don't like putting puzzles together, but I forced myself as a mother, okay, play puzzles. But I have a brother and his family, they just do puzzles for just for the fun of it. He happens to be a retired helicopter pilot for the US Army, but his spatial orientation or spatial awareness is a part of his perceptual skills. And that's very necessary when you think about the helicopter thing. Anyway, so I wanted to make sure we give you at least one idea for each. Now, when it comes for the information processing, this can be tough because you get thousands of bits of information in your head all of the time. How in the world can you organize that? So let me take you through an activity. Are you ready? And I need you to pay attention here. I want to give you 60 seconds to interpret the meaning of this picture. So you can put it in the chat.
This one seems to have gotten a few of you all stuck because some of those responses were a little bit quicker.
Okay.
All right. I think.
All right. Well, we'll go. Pardon?
Go ahead. I was going to say we had a
Okay.
couple more seconds. Yep.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead. Well, it has to do with the word star. Now look at there. I don't know who said it, but you got twinkle, glitter, galaxy, you got movie, you got Hollywood, you got shine, you got light. It all has to do with the word star. For an individual with processing problems, they may see all of these words and have no idea how to organize them so that they could be at a central place so that they can pull it back when they come together. And guess what? That's what they need, especially when you consider how much information is given throughout a day. They're in school for almost 6 hours and they're getting plummeted with information all day long. And then you're saying to them, why don't you remember anything I taught you? And it's just because everything, it goes in, so you think organized, it gets here and it gets all jumbled up and then it comes out and it's very disorganized again. So it's really important for us to recognize that we really have to acknowledge the fact that if a child can't process information, they're going to have great difficulty. Let me give you the one thing that you can do at home. It's going to seem really simple, but it's true. There's a book called Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, right? But if you think about a kindergarten class, but I'm going to take it even before kindergarten, from the time a child is able to do something on his own, teaching that child organization. In other words, the yellow crayons go here, the blue crayons go here, or all the crayons go in that box. All the pencils go in that box. All your shoes go in this box. All your socks go in this drawer. So it's teaching the brain how to develop schematics for organization. That's a very simplified answer, but it's something that you can do at home, just insisting upon organization. And then when you talk to your kids, do word associations. So you say to them, just as an example, I need you to wash the dishes. Why are washing dishes important? It's a health reason. So that we can have something to eat off tomorrow. It's just trying to teach them how to associate words to an ultimate meaning. Believe it or not, the brain has It's an oversimplified term, but it has what's called knowledge stores. So just everything that you've done is planted in your brain somehow. And learning is a constructive process. It builds on previous knowledge. So if every time you talk to a child or if you provide an instruction, you connect it to something they already learned, it helps to develop that in their brain. All right, let's look quickly at storage, Tanya.
Absolutely. And just so that you all know, if you haven't noticed, in the chat, I'm putting the strategy tips for you all to do at home. So if you don't remember them, don't worry. I'm putting those little tips inside the chat for you all to look back at. Moving on, we're looking at storage. And in storage, we're looking at our memory. How do we, or do we have the ability to store, retain, and recall information and experiences? This is very important in the process of learning because a lot of times you'll hear it in the guys, there are different aspects of memory, but one of the greatest ones that we often talk about is the working memory, where we must hold one bit of information while working with another bit of information and applying it together. And so as we're doing this, this is very important for the learner to have so that they can retain the information, they can store it, and then they can recall that for what is necessary. What's an activity that we have for this?
Okay, so there, y'all get ready. Now, when I did this activity with my daughter yesterday, she was ready to throw me away. But let's just go ahead and do it. It's simple, but that working memory, this is an example of working memory, okay? All right, here we go. Okay, are you smarter than a third grader? Robert had 16 marbles. His brother gave him 3 more bags of marbles. Each bag contained 5 marbles. How many marbles does Robert have now? Now, what I want you to remember while you're working through this problem is that there are key words that you have to pay attention to. You've got to pay attention to sum. If you see the word sum of, total of, plus, increase, by, more than, added to, gain by, raised by, all together. All of those are keywords to say you need to add. But what are the keywords if you need to subtract? If you see difference, between, minus, decrease, by, less than, subtracted from, reduce. Come on, you got to really pay attention because you don't know what it is that you're doing. And so I'm trying to give you some instruction before you actually go into your problem. And so if you see words like product of, multiply by, twice, thrice, times, double, that means you're going to multiply. But don't forget, there are 4 operations you can do. And the next one is division. If you see something that says a quotient or it's divided by, grouped equally into, shared equally among, separated into, split among, then you'll be able to do it. Now, I have given you all the instruction that you need to work this problem. So go ahead and work it.
Put your answers in the chat.
Or your responses.
Your responses in the chat. What's the answer? How many marbles did he have? Somebody said 33. Okay. 31.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we have?
The better question, how many of you just said, forget it?
One person said, question again, please.
Okay. All right. Did anybody feel like, oh my Lord, how am I going to do this? Stop talking, will you? All right. So
yes, someone said yes.
But once again, teachers don't mean any harm. It's just that they're trying to teach. But when you have a child with working memory issues, they've got to be able to hold one bit of information to work on the next bit of information. And if you're constantly talking while they're trying to work it, it'll never get done. So after the teacher has done all of this hard teaching and the kid doesn't come up with the answer, they go, you just weren't paying attention. Oh, well, perhaps they were, but they were paying attention to everything. And so nothing has made any sense. So that memory part is really very important. All right, let's hit our last one. Oh, by the way, almost forgot. Strategies for the working or for memory. Music is one of the best things you can do. I always tell people, if you want to see if you want to test whether or not a child is really a struggling learner, Ask them for the lyrics of all the latest songs. They can sing them to the hilt. And you can't tell me that a child doesn't have an ability to learn if he can sing the lyrics of every song, but it's because music works very closely with the memory areas of the brain. That's important. Movement, believe it or not. Where a child is sitting, where he learns information, or where the teacher is standing, can help that child with recall of information. But here's the other thing, emotional orchestration. How many of you can remember the smell of your mom's, or how your mom smelled, or remember how your grandma's kitchen smelled when you go there, or remember just stuff, remember when you had your first date? Those are emotional memory sections, and the brain really pays attention to the emotional aspects of the brain. So that's important to do that. So let's look at the language. It's the ability to express and receive thoughts, words, feelings through a system of verbal and nonverbal signals. Language is not just about whether or not you can verbally output. But let's go ahead to our activity for language, because it's really important. So I just want you, so what happened, no, so actually what I want to do, if we don't, so I'm really trying to make sure that well, let me see. So what do I want to do? I think I want, okay, so if you would just pay attention to what no, anyway, so let me see, what was that word? What was I trying to say? Okay, no, all right. Now, how many of you were thoroughly frustrated with that? Yeah. So a lot of times when a child is listening to a teacher, that's what they hear. They don't get all the full sounds and stuff, or they might miss the word endings or the word beginnings, and they are trying to figure out what you're saying. All right. The other part of it is, do you have then when they're trying to express themselves, they have difficulty retrieving a word. So it comes out very choppy, and teachers and parents, we get very impatient with them, and we'll try to finish the sentence for them, and that just doesn't happen. I have to keep emphasizing we're being very broad in our descriptions, but we're trying to let you know that these are some things, some indicators, and just because those things happen, it doesn't mean that that child cannot learn. You just have to pay attention to it. So one of the ways to deal with language is teach the child how to self-talk. When you're working a problem, talk it out in your head, in your mind. And parents, when you're at home, and this used to be more prevalent than it is now, if father and mother are working on something at home, talking through the challenge or the problem and walking through the steps, kids learn from what they see and hear. We've moved to the technology world now, and a lot of times we just sit there and we clash, throw out everything on the computer, when talking can really be helpful in that regard. Okay. All righty. And this is really, really important. Tanya, you want to take this one?
Absolutely. So oftentimes, as you all have heard, when the brain is stressed out, there are 3 types of reactions that you're typically going to get: fight, flight, or freeze. And so all of these things that we've gone over with you are ways in which the struggling learner can have a brain overload where they are stressed out. And you may in turn see some of these reactions: fight, flight, or freeze. Or, as we talked about earlier, some of the mask that they may typically wear because they are overwhelmed with trying to compensate for the part in which they're struggling. So, as their advocates, we want to empower you to notice these aspects of them, discuss with their teachers, and really go about intentionally focusing on the areas in which they need more support in versus focusing on the stressors of the brain or in the mask that we often see our children wearing.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize the piece about the brain that freezes. Nothing's going in. So when you, my grandson is learning Arabic in the army, and it's a very stressful time for him. And so he says, it's not going in, Nana, it's not going in. And I said, that's because you are stressed. It will not go in as long as you're stressed. So mindfulness is a big area that's out now. Let kids go out and play. Take them to the park. Let them have some ice cream, rest or something. But the stressed brain is not going to be productive. And so we have to notice that. Here's what the brain seeks. If you're trying to figure out the best way to reach your child's brain, do patterns. The brain loves patterns. If you look at math is probably one of the best ways to establish patterns, but it doesn't have to be math. It can be anything. I get up in the morning, I brush my teeth, I put on my clothes, I eat breakfast. That's a pattern. You can set that apart. And so then that becomes a part of what the brain seeks. It seeks meaning. It wants to understand what you're saying. It's just not here for no reason. And novelty. Doing the same thing over and over and over again is not the answer. I'm working with some school districts now, and because of the pandemic, there was a lot of regression in students' learning. And so one of the ways that they have sought to address it is to extend the school day or the school year, and they just give them the same thing over and over again. And I'm like, that's not going to cure it. It's not going to address it, I should say, because you got to come at it differently. So it's novelty. And the brain loves questions. Now, this is something you can do at home, and I love this. Put an odd object on the table in the morning or next to their bed at night. I mean, for when they wake up in the morning, something that would make them curious. And you say to them, when they get up, they'll go, why is this odd-shaped orange in my room? And then you can go, well, what do you think? That's novelty, and it's getting the brain asking questions. And then that's gonna be something that you could do every day, and it can really trigger learning in a positive way. Good way to start the day. Tanya?
So we also look in that idea as we're furthering on what the brain seeks. And the brain seeks community. It seeks security, active participation, and feedback and recognition. And I say all these together, but they're each individually ways in which the brain has support in finding understanding and in gaining the information it needs to make a conclusion. So that security, providing that idea that it's in a safe place, that it's allowed to make mistakes as well as receive feedback. Say that again.
And to take risk.
And to take risks, exactly. And then active participation, feedback and recognition that despite failures or accomplishments, they're going to learn how to grow and to build from there.
And it's too funny. If you think about this, if you think about these two things and what the brain seeks, these two slides, that's exactly what video games do for our children. That's why they get so caught up in it. So I'm just going to look at this. There are patterns, there's meaning, there's novelty, there's questions. Every time you turn on a game, there's community because they're playing often with others. There's the security, they can take a risk and it'll be okay. It's active participation, feedback, and recognition. All of those things are extremely important. I want to end our section with this slide so that you can know that what we're really after is that no child should have his wonder diminished because of our ignorance or inactivity, and no child should be deprived of discovery because we lack the resources to discover his problem, and no child should ever doubt himself or his mind because we're unsure of our commitment. Hamganat wrote that as a as almost as a promise or a commitment for teachers, for educators. But I want to extend it to parents. We are their first teachers, and we are the ones that support them throughout their educational career, throughout life. My daughter is quite beyond the years of my parenting now, but I still take great responsibility in her well-being. And so it's just, I don't think we're ever free of it. So as we move forward as parents, I'm hoping that you found some insight into this. And as I said before, is much more involved, but just to understand that when your child is struggling, it doesn't mean that they can't learn. It just means that we've got to find the avenue to reach them. And then we must be consistent, not only at school, but at home. What we do at home should embrace what's done at school, and what's done at school should embrace what's done at home. It has to be collaborative. It can't be me against you. It really means that we have to come together to make this happen. So in our last few minutes, are there any questions that you might have?
All right, so the question that we have in the chat is, how do you assist your child with reading comprehension?
Good. Okay. Let me just share this. This is, well, once again, long, but this is important. The best readers use a strategy called visual imaging. You've got to, or visualization. You've got to be able to visualize what you're reading. So if I say to you, the lady walked down the street and saw something she'd never seen before, you automatically should have a picture of what that lady looks like in your head. You define that story for yourself based on your own experiences. That's what makes you comprehend it. If you don't use a visualization strategy, it's just a lady walking down the street. So one of the sure ways to help kids with comprehension is to get them to visualize the elements of the story in the context of their experiences. One of the big things in schools now is teaching children how to infer or to do inference. In other words, can you see what the author is intending to say without saying it? That's one of the ways that they're trying to help build the whole visualization process. Long answer, but that's just one really good example. Asking questions right after it doesn't always do it because the working memory gets in the way. So just having them to visualize it in the context of their experiences goes a long way.
Excellent. Are there any other questions? Feel free. Okay. There's another one in the chat, not necessarily for us. It says, are teachers attending these workshops? And Miss Renata said, great answer. Thank you so much. I think there's an invitation to all. I think there's a variety of teachers and parents attending the workshop, but it is the Cumberland Family Academy. So it is focused on you all as the family.
And can I just say something about this? I forget your name, the lady's in charge. What's your name? Communication.
Oh, Wakinya.
Miss Wakinya, okay. I do a lot of consultation with schools. And one of the things I do when I go into the districts, I ask to speak to families. And they don't always have family engagement, connections like this. This is wonderful. It's the reason I volunteered for it, because we've got to work together. We cannot be against each other. So I've done some rather unorthodox things to reach parents, like just going into the community center and say, come, let's talk. Because the more you know as parents, the better your children are going to be.
Thank you.